Here is the truth about most American perennial gardens. They look spectacular for about 3 weeks in June, and then they quietly give up. The spring flush fades, the summer heat arrives, and suddenly you are staring at a yard full of green lumps that haven't done anything interesting in 2 months. You went to the nursery, you spent real money, and you expected color. What went wrong isn't your soil, and it isn't your watering schedule, it's the plants. Most gardeners are choosing perennials that bloom once and disappear, when there is an entirely different category of plant that runs from late spring straight through the first killing frost without stopping. 13 of those plants are on this list. Some you already know. Several you have almost certainly never grown. One of them, number 8, generates more hummingbird activity per square foot than almost anything else you can put in the ground, and the majority of American gardeners have never heard its name. 1. Catmint. Number 1 is catmint, and if you have been underplanting this one, you have been leaving some of the easiest, most reliable long-season color in American gardening sitting on the table. The flowers are a soft lavender blue that settle into a low, billowing cloud right at border level when a full planting hits its stride in late May. And here is what separates catmint from the average perennial. That bloom does not stop. In most U.S. gardens, a well-managed planting runs from late May all the way through October. The secret is one firm cutback. Take it down by about a third right after that first big June flush. Cut it back hard, and within 3 to 4 weeks it returns fuller and more loaded with color than it was the first time. Hardy in zones 3 through 8, it handles everything from northern Minnesota winters to mid-Atlantic summers without complaint. Run it along pathways, drape it over the front edge of a border, let it spill down a slope. It spreads with grace and never becomes a problem. Every pollinator in your neighborhood will locate it, and the garden will feel genuinely alive because of it from May straight through frost. 2. Echinacea. Number 2 is Echinacea, and before you decide you already know this plant, stop. The Echinacea most American gardeners grew up with, that single stiff purple cone in the back of the border, has been completely transformed by plant breeders over the past decade. Today's varieties come in salmon, deep coral, golden yellow, creamy white, and rich by colors that look like they belong on a painter's canvas rather than a nursery bench. Varieties like Cheyenne Spirit and the Sunseeker series perform reliably across zones 3 through 9, which is coast-to-coast adaptability that almost no other perennial on this list can match. The bloom window runs from early summer clean through fall. When the flowers finally fade, leave those seed heads standing straight through winter. Goldfinches and chickadees depend on them when every other food source has disappeared from the frozen landscape. No native perennial in this country attracts more species of pollinators per square foot at peak bloom. Gardeners in zones 7 through 9 choose heat-tolerant varieties and give your plants some afternoon shade during the hottest months. That one adjustment is the difference between a plant that thrives and one that burns out before Labor Day. 3. Black-eyed Susan. Number 3 is Black-eyed Susan, and the reason it belongs on this list is not just its beauty. It is because the new varieties have finally solved the single problem that frustrated American gardeners with this plant for years. The older types developed leaf spot by midsummer and looked ragged and worn right when the garden needed them most. Varieties like American Goldrush and Little Gold Star are disease-resistant, stay clean all season long, and push out rich golden yellow flowers with deep chocolate-brown centers from late June straight through the first hard frost. That is one of the longest natural bloom windows of any perennial available to U.S. gardeners. Plant it in the middle of a border, mass it along a fence line, let it naturalize in a meadow area. Black-eyed Susan handles every one of those situations across zones 3 through 9. And when September arrives and monarch butterflies begin their migration south toward Mexico, they stop at Rudbeckia specifically. A yard full of these in late summer is a legitimate way station on one of the most extraordinary migrations on this planet. 4. Hardy Geranium. Number 4 is hardy geranium, And this is the plant that confuses more American gardeners than almost anything else in the perennial world. When most people hear the word geranium, they picture that red annual sitting in a window box that gets thrown out every October. That plant and this plant share a name and almost nothing else. Hardy geranium, the true cranesbill, is a tough, spreading, long-blooming perennial that returns reliably year after year. In zones 4 through 8, the variety to find at your nursery is Rosin. It produces vivid violet-blue flowers that bloom longer than any other hardy geranium variety on the U.S. market, running from April through September with a light trim after the first big flush in early summer. Full sun, partial shade, it handles both without complaint. It spreads into a soft ground-covering mound that fills the gaps under roses, along shaded borders, and in every awkward corner that nothing else closes as gracefully. Small native bees and hoverflies that cannot access larger, deeper flowers find hardy geranium wide open and easy to work, and they return to it all season long. If you garden in the Pacific Northwest or New England, this plant performs at its absolute best in your cooler, moister conditions. 5. Penstemon. Number 5 is Penstemon, and the hummingbirds have known about this plant for centuries. American gardeners are only now catching up with what those birds figured out a long time ago. Penstemon is native to North America. It evolved here, it belongs here, and there are species and varieties adapted to nearly every U.S. region, from dry, rocky mountain slopes to humid southeastern gardens to cold northern borders in zones 3 and 4. The tubular flowers come in vivid scarlet, rich purple, deep pink, and soft lavender depending on which variety you choose, and they bloom from late spring through midsummer with select varieties pushing well into fall. Plant 3 or more together in a sunny, well-drained spot, and from Memorial Day onward, ruby-throated hummingbirds in the east and broad-tailed hummingbirds in the west will find them before you have even finished watering. There is one critical thing to know about Penstemon, and it is the exact reason most gardeners lose it over winter. Do not prune it until late spring. Those old stems protect the crown from freeze damage through the cold months. Cutting them back in fall is the #1 reason this plant fails to return in zones 4, 5, and 6. Leave them standing. The plant knows what it is doing. 6. Perennial Salvia. Number 6 is Perennial Salvia, and this is the plant that solved the dead midsummer garden problem that drives American gardeners absolutely crazy every July. Everything looks spent. The spring bloomers finished weeks ago, and the fall performers have not started yet. Perennial Salvia fills that gap in the most dramatic color your yard has probably ever seen. Deep violet, cobalt blue, rich burgundy red, colors that hold their intensity through full summer heat when every pastel in your border has already washed out and gone pale. Hardy in zones 4 through 9, Salvia blooms strong from late spring through fall, and the secret to keeping it producing all season is consistent deadheading. Cut spent flower spikes back to the next set of leaves, and new stems emerge within 2 weeks. Neglect that one task and the plant shifts its energy into seed production, and the show slows down considerably. In zones 7 through 9, the varieties Amistad and Black and Blue handle southern heat and humidity better than anything else currently on the market. Plant salvia in front of ornamental grasses or alongside golden black-eyed Susans, and the color contrast stops people on the sidewalk. 7. Heuchera. Number 7 is Heuchera, known as coral bells, and this is the only plant on this entire list that earns its place even on the days it is not blooming. The flowers are delicate wands of coral, pink, or white that rise above the foliage from late spring through midsummer, and hummingbirds visit them regularly. But the real performance is the foliage. Deep burgundy, burnt caramel, lime green, silver colors that hold from March straight through December in most U.S. climates across zones 4 through 9. And it genuinely thrives in shade, which makes it one of the most valuable perennials you can put under trees or along the north side of a structure where almost nothing else grows with any visual interest. Gardeners in zones 4 through 6 pay attention to one specific issue. Heuchera heaves out of the soil over winter as the ground freezes and thaws. Check your plants in early spring, press the crowns firmly back down, and add a light layer of mulch around the base. That one simple habit keeps your coral bells thriving for years. 8. Agastache. Number 8 is Agastache, commonly called hummingbird mint, and this is the plant that pollinators find before you have even finished planting it. Push a few Agastache into the ground on a Saturday morning, and by Sunday afternoon, something with wings will have already located it. That is not an exaggeration. That is what happens in yards across this country every summer when this plant hits its bloom stride. Agastache blooms from midsummer through hard frost, which makes it one of the strongest late-season performers on this entire list. When everything else in your border is winding down in August and September, Agastache is just Ray. Aching its peak. The new Kudos and Paquito series bring colors to this plant that simply did not exist a decade ago: vivid coral, deep magenta, soft peach, warm apricot, and gentle lilac. And every one of those colors pulls pollinators in a way that very little else in a late-season garden replicates. Hardy in zones 5 through 10, depending on variety, and in zones 5 and 6, many gardeners grow it in containers to sidestep winter entirely. The single non-negotiable requirement is sharp drainage. Plant it in amended, gritty soil with excellent water movement, and it thrives for years. Put it in heavy clay that holds moisture through winter, and it rots at the crown even within its hardiness zone. Get the drainage right, and this plant rewards you with more pollinator activity per square foot than almost anything else on this list. Southwest and southern gardeners in zones 7 through 10. Agastache was practically engineered for your heat and your dry conditions. 9. Amsonia. Number 9 is Amsonia, called Blue Star, and this is the Native American perennial that delivers two completely separate, completely spectacular performances in a single growing season. And the vast majority of American gardeners have never once seen it growing in a yard. The first performance happens in late April and May, when star-shaped powder blue flowers open above clean, willowy foliage. That soft blue is a color almost nothing else in the spring garden produces. Not a purple, not a violet, but a true clear powder blue that reads beautifully from across the yard. Then the flowers finish, the foliage stays full and handsome all summer, and in October something remarkable happens. The entire plant turns a brilliant golden yellow that rivals the fall color of ornamental trees that cost 10 times as much. 2 complete shows from one plant, across zones 3 through 9. Cut Amsonia back by 1/3 in late June to keep it compact and encourage that denser, more spectacular fall display. Left unpruned, it tends to flop through midsummer, and the autumn show loses much of its impact. Gardeners in the southeast and mid-Atlantic especially, Amsonia tabernaemontana is native to your specific region and will establish faster and root deeper than any imported variety. 10. Baptisia. Number 10 is Baptisia, known as false indigo, and this is the perennial that looks like it belongs in a botanic garden display and costs almost nothing to maintain once it settles into your yard. The flower spikes are deep violet blue. Some varieties come in soft yellow or creamy white, rising dramatically above silvery blue-green foliage in mid-spring, and the visual impact when a mature clump hits full bloom is genuinely arresting. After the flowers finish, decorative seed pods develop that rattle in the wind and hold real structural interest in the border all the way through October. Hardy in zones 3 through 9 with drought tolerance once established that is frankly extraordinary. Baptisia develops a deep, searching taproot that anchors it against conditions that kill everything planted around it. That same taproot is exactly why you need to plant it where you want it permanently. Transplanting Baptisia after its second year in the ground is nearly impossible without losing the plant entirely. Choose your spot, plant it there, and leave it alone. It will reward that patience by growing into a larger, more beautiful, more structurally impressive clump every single year for decades. Several specialist native bee species depend on Baptisia specifically within U.S. ecosystems, making it a keystone plant in ways that go well beyond its considerable beauty. 11. Crocosmia. Number 11 is Crocosmia, and this is the most visually dramatic late summer perennial on this entire list, and the fact that most American gardeners have never planted it is one of the great missed opportunities in home gardening. When Crocosmia hits full bloom in July and August, the arching stems loaded with fiery orange-red flowers look like living flames moving through the border. There is genuinely nothing else in the summer garden that produces that specific quality of heat and drama. Some varieties come in golden yellow and deep scarlet, but it is that vivid orange-red that makes people stop their cars when they see it growing in a yard. Hardy in zones 5 through 9. And the key to reliable return performance in zones 5 and 6 is straightforward. Mulch the corms heavily in November with a 4-inch layer of shredded leaves over the entire planting area. That insulation gives them exactly what they need to survive the freeze-thaw cycles of northern winters. Plant Crocosmia in front of ornamental grasses where those arching stems can be fully appreciated, or mass it in a cutting garden where the stems make extraordinary long-lasting arrangements. Hummingbirds are drawn irresistibly to those tubular orange flowers from July onward. Put this near a window you look out of regularly, and you will have a fro. Enteroseat to daily hummingbird visits through the heart of summer. 12. Chelone. Number 12 is Chelone, the turtlehead. And this is the Native American perennial with a flower so genuinely unusual that people stop mid-conversation on a garden tour and ask what it is every single time without exception. The hooded pink flowers genuinely resemble a turtle's open mouth, not in a vague, squinting kind of way, but immediately and obviously the moment you see the plant in bloom. Rich pink to deep rose, blooming from August through October, which makes Chelone one of the latest blooming native perennials available to American gardeners anywhere in the country. Hardy in zones 3 through 8. The place Chelone belongs is anywhere consistently moist, rain gardens, low spots along a fence line, the edge of a stream or pond, park-shade borders where the soil stays damp and late-season color is the hardest thing in the world to find. If your yard has a wet low area where other plants drown and nothing seems to thrive, Chelone will treat that exact problem spot like paradise. Bumblebees are its primary pollinator. The flower is specifically shaped to accommodate their size and weight, and in late summer when bumblebee colonies reach their seasonal peak, a stand of Chelone in full bloom is one of the most ecologically alive spots in any American yard. 13. Veronicastrum. Number 13 is Veronicastrum, known as Culver's root, and the fact that most American gardeners cannot name this plant is one of the most significant missed opportunities in U.S. perennial gardening today. Walk through any serious botanical garden from the Midwest to the Mid-Atlantic in July, and you will find it tall, architectural, absolutely commanding at the back of a border. White or soft lavender candelabra-style flower spikes rise 4 to 6 feet straight up with a structural presence that nothing else in the summer garden replicates. This is not a delicate plant, and it is not a filler plant. Veronicastrum is a statement, and once you place it correctly, it becomes the plant every visitor asks about without fail. Hardy in zones 3 through 8, blooming from July through September, and documented as a nectar source for over 100 species of native bees and butterflies across U.S. ecosystems, including 43 bee species recorded visiting a single planting by entomologist Charles Robertson. Ecologists classify it as a keystone species for mid-Atlantic and Midwestern landscapes, meaning entire communities of insects and birds organize part of their seasonal activity around its presence. Plant it at the back of a border or in the center of an island bed. Pair it with Echinacea in front and ornamental grasses alongside, and the combination looks like something a professional designer charged thousands of dollars to produce. Established clumps spread slowly and steadily over 3 to 4 years into impressive self-supporting columns that need no staking despite their considerable height. Give it room from the beginning. Leave it alone. And Veronicastrum will become the most talked about plant in your yard within 2 full growing seasons. That is all 13 plants that do not quit on you in July, do not leave your yard bare through August and September, and do not require a new nursery bill every spring to maintain some color. These plants come back. They bloom long. They feed the bees, the butterflies, and the hummingbirds that make a garden feel alive rather than just decorated. The difference between a yard that performs from Memorial Day through the first frost and one that peaks in June and disappears is not luck, and it is not a bigger budget. It is knowing which plants actually deliver across a full season, and now you know exactly which 13 to reach for. If this list gave you real, usable information, subscribe to Garden Roots right now and drop your answer in the comments. Which plant on this list are you putting in the ground first?